Reign of Jafar has released, and with the weekend come and gone, we now have new tournaments that have been happening with Set 8. So what decks ended up placing, what do those deck lists look like, and what can we expect with a now new shapy meta? All of that and more starting right now. So Reign of Jafar really shook things up, but this time a little bit more for the better. You didn't see everything just flood into Sapphire and everyone's like, well, what do we do from here? No. Instead, it's been a lot more peaceful of a meta that's been coming into Reign of Jafar, and that's lucky because, man, if you guys remember last set, that was a little bit insane because we had that tournament that happened where we saw Oswald with Tamatoa and it just dominated and it was absolutely insane. But luckily things have calmed down a little bit because it looks like this set might be a little bit more healthier, especially in that regard, because everything kind of fizzled out a little bit. Nothing necessarily went right or wrong, but it just kind of everything got support and almost evenly so. And it looks like that's what we're going to be looking at in this meta. But still, there's a couple of things that are really interesting going on here. Now, first and foremost, we are going to be looking at the, let me get out of the way. That's not the ETA report. That's the meta report. And with that, guys, we have some interesting things. Now, of course, we didn't have necessarily any huge tournaments, and that's going to be something that'll be noted. Now, yeah, we did have an 86-person tournament, but even still with that big of a tournament, that wasn't necessarily something that, you know, everyone kind of had what they could get their hands on literally the day of release, and then the next day they were playing a tournament. So take a lot of this list with a grain of salt, essentially, because this isn't going to necessarily be anything to write home about. There's still a lot to come, and I really think that next Saturday and Sunday, those tournaments there are going to have a lot more to add to this current meta as we continue to shape into things. Now, with that being said, this is still really interesting to take a look at. And first and foremost, this Amber Steel deck is going to be, of course, Steel Song. It's always been a prevalent deck in here, and it managed to take down a tournament with 24 people. And I mean, gosh, the prize support right there, a Reign of Jafar, Gem 10, Elsa. That's a pretty big prize right there. I mean, between an $800 to $1,000 card, I mean, that's a little crazy. But this deck is really interesting in the sense that you are going to be looking at a Rhino here as kind of the new ad. I mean, the Rhino can go ahead and shift too. Seems to be taking the place of the Queen. But even still, it is a very powerful card because the big Rhino, when this character has no damage, he gains resist +2, and as a 4/3 that can be very powerful as well, and just can be able to come in on turn 2 as a 4/3 with resist 2 is a little bit crazy. Everything else is kind of pretty standard in this case, but I also do love the bare necessities that can really help on pulling out the cards that are very dangerous that you don't want to necessarily see early in the game and just get things taken out. You can get rid of people's Zeus's, Raging Fires, get rid of their McDuck Manors or whatever else you might necessarily want to get rid of with that. So really interesting build right there. Didn't necessarily see any Goofies in this build either, but that'll be something to be seen. Is Goofy good? Is it too slow? We'll see, but it's going to be interesting to see how this will play out. Now, the next card that I am very curious about here, that I am excited, and this is one that I definitely want to play as well, is going to be Steel Emerald here. And I mean, this also took first, and this was in the bigger tournament. This was the Southside Gaming Tournament. And again, all decks you can go ahead and look at inktables.ink, and you can go ahead, or at inkdex.com, and be able to look at the tournaments. There's a whole tab for it, and you can look up what are set 8 tournaments, set 7 tournaments, and even those going on in Japan. But this one's a really interesting one because it severely capitalizes on what Prince John can do, and that is because Beyond the Horizon is a really good card when it comes to Prince John. Why is that? Well, I mean, Prince John straight up just has the ability that, you know, whenever your opponent discards a card, you draw a card. And then, of course, Diablo, whenever your opponent draws a card, you draw a card. And so there's just a lot of mayhem here in this case that can happen. Now, one of the craziest combos, too, on top of that, is if you go ahead and have Ursula that is going ahead and group singing in this case, then Ursula can still replay Beyond the Horizon for free and even cause your opponent to discard and redraw another 3 cards if you so choose. And that even can mean that you don't even select yourself for the second go around, or really even at all. You don't necessarily need to unless you are in trouble with some card draw here. But even still, the fact of the matter is that you can go ahead and play Beyond the Horizon so effectively easily. And rightfully so, this deck was able to take first place at the big tournament of the week, and this was the 86-player tournament. Very impressive to see. Everything else is pretty standard. You can see that he kind of, was preparing for the item decks that might be showing up, the grab your swords for the hyper aggro, going against the Churna dogs and things of that nature, just to be prepared, in that case. And looks like was able to rightfully do so and had a lot of really crazy things. Now, this is going to be interesting too, just because it plays around a lot of really cheeky stuff, and I am excited to see what is going to be had with this. Now, next, of course, this is going to be really interesting as well, mainly because Ruby Amethyst was able to get second at the Southside Gaming Tournament as well, and that's going to be something to keep note here with that. Now, Southside Gaming had a little bit of a mix. It didn't necessarily have a whole lot of Steel Song, but even still, the evasive version of this deck can counter Steel Song efficiently, but it still is going to be a deck that might be struggling against it. And there's not necessarily even any new cards here, which is really surprising as well. I mean, you see everybody's got a weakness, which is a great card in this circumstance, but otherwise, everything else is actually pretty standard here. It's the only new card, and of course, the Monstro is an absolutely insane add as well, but you're only playing one of with that. Now, his ability is insane because as long as you can discard a card, you can ready and challenge. And as a 6/8, you can go absolutely crazy with that. And so this is going to be just a really fun deck to really clean the board up and then just quest until you get to the end. And also if you even have like the library out, for example, you're able to then still go into the Be Prepared and gain the passive lore, rebuild your board, and maintain the board state as you can continue to go into everything. So really interesting deck. I do think this might struggle later in the meta, just depending on how things continue to adjust. But still, even getting a second place, great job right there. Super exciting to see. Now, even still, another tournament. Of course, this one was over 20 players in this case, but still a Sapphire Steel deck in the meta. This is something that I predicted here. I still don't necessarily know how I feel about this. There might be some overhype with this deck, but still, the Desperate Plan is still an absolutely powerful card. Being able to, if you have no cards in hand, draw 3 cards, or if you just have a crappy hand, you can discard that hand and draw 3. Now, with that, of course, there is going to be a couple of cards that you might want to put into this deck, like the Namaris and things of that nature as well. Even the Gray Stitch as well, which every time that you take out a character with him, then you're able to draw a card and gain a lore, which can be a big game changer here. I'm also not too sure about how good the Arthur is, but still, in this case, managing to get a top 4 with Sapphire Steel, really good thing to see. Really interesting as well, Desperate Plan only being at 2 and playing 4 docks, and so it's going to be interesting to see how that ends up playing out a little bit more. Desperate Plan, maybe he might have only had 2 that he pulled, and so because of that, you're not going to necessarily see anything going with that. But great job with that, Scott. Great win right there on getting the 4th place with Blue Steel. It very well might be back. The big thing that it was missing was that card draw, and it looks like it got it. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how that continues to develop in this meta. Now, with that also, this is going to be an interesting one because this was a 3rd place, and this is a little cheeky in this case. I really like where this is going, and you can even play this with the new Lumiere as well, which would be really interesting. But in this case, they just went more for the heavy items in that regard, and going with like even the Scrooge McDucks, the Bell, and whatnot, and still getting a 15 or getting 3rd place at a 1500 pre-release event is really awesome to be able to see. And this is, going to be a little bit standard. Now, of course, they did try to do the wardrobe, which is really good because you can discard the card from your hand to be able to draw 2 cards. It has to be an item. That can really add a lot of value right there, and especially if it's an item that you don't necessarily care about. Like if it is a Vitalosphere and you have a Tamatoa in hand, you're willing to sacrifice that just to go ahead and get it back, and rightfully so. Now, of course, the wardrobe can be taken out, but really the only thing that can take it out is a really good Strength of a Raging Fire or a Zeus. Otherwise, it's not necessarily going to be doing much. Now, I do also love the fact that they have a get out as well, because you're able to banish a character, but also be able to grab an item card back from your banish into your hand. And so this is something that I really think is going to be changing a little bit as well. And one thing that we are going to be looking at later in the week with a different video is we're going to be taking a look at Lilo being a part of a action deck as well for Ruby Sapphire, which could be really interesting to see as well with that. And so great job. 3rd place, 60 card deck. Sword of Shan Nu is going to be a really interesting one as well, being able to exert it and tap a character. You can tap a Tipo and then just ready up a character. And if that character is a Tamatoa, That's a little scary. Also, if that character is, Big Tamato, Little Tamatoa, a Maui, even a Maui half Shrek, if you're playing it in this kind of deck, there's a lot of really scary things that you can do with the Sword of Shanu, and that's why I'm pretty excited to see what this deck can do. And I mean, it looks like it was able to get a third place, and rightfully so. It is a scary deck to have to go against. And so, with that being said, though, that's going to be the whole meta report. Now, what do you guys think about this meta? It looks like it could be wide open right here. And again, this is just the beginning. There is so much to be able to see what this deck is going to be able to bring. But with that being said, I'm going to be very curious to see how everything is going to continue to unwind. Again, I still think there's a lot to see. We didn't necessarily see Blurple break into the meta all that much, but again, I still think people are kind of figuring out even where Blurple is going to go, trying to get those cards and seeing what is going to happen. But also, there's a lot of stacks. We haven't even seen Steel Song necessarily starting to enter the playing field, and it's going to be interesting to see how Desperate Plan and even Beyond the Horizon playing into that as well. But anyway, guys, what decks are you looking forward to test in Reign of Jafar, and what decks are you going to think are going to be at the top with this current meta? Go ahead and let me know down in the comments below, and until next time, guys, have a good one.